The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to this webinar with your host, Craig Proctor.
Hello, everyone. We've got a very super cool webinar here for you today because it's probably what I know best, which is the listing presentation. And it's certainly what's going to help you the most in your real estate business, because there's a real art and science to having an unstoppable listing presentation. You can do everything else right with this system. You can generate leads. You can set up all kinds of appointments. And if you aren't really good at this, your experience in real estate is going to be you win some and you lose some. And in my first couple of years of the real estate business, that's how I thought it worked. You know, you win some, you lose some. And many of you may think the same way. And I didn't really understand why it was like that. I just thought it was the nature of the business. And as I became more successful, I carefully studied the words that came out of my mouth to try to analyze, why is it that, when I do a good job and I get the listing, what exactly is happening there? And when I lose the listing, what exactly is happening in those situations? And that's really how my listing presentation evolved over many years. And I'm sure you do the same thing where you test certain things, saying certain things, and the stuff that works, you keep. And when you experiment with words that don't work, you kick those out and you don't use that again. And that's how this thing evolved, is just through simple experimentation and, practice over and over and over again. Now, I listed over 10,000 homes during that 22-year career of mine, more than anybody else in the Greater Toronto area. So with practice, you tend to become really, really, really good at this. And that's why, when I do the super conferences, for example, I only do them a couple times a year. I really have to rehearse and practice to do those because I just don't do them often enough. Well, that wasn't the case with my listing presentation because I was doing 3 or 4 of them every single day. So you do have the opportunity to go back out there several times a day and do it over and over and over again and experiment and perfect. Now, the good news for all of you is you don't have to do that, because on today's webinar, I'm going to share with you exactly what I did, the order I did it in, and I'm going to explain to you why I did certain things a certain way, and hopefully this will make sense. So this is going to greatly shorten your learning curve. And here's what I'm going to suggest is, if you haven't already done this, at the end of our webinar here today, you download this listing presentation and you make the small customizations that I'm going to ask you to make today. And you go out and you start to use this. Now, some of you are already doing this and some of you are already seeing success with it. But I promise you this, once you use these slides and you say what I say in the order that I say it, you're going to start to win. And as you start to win, it's going to make you more confident. And as you become more confident, you speak with conviction. And as you speak with conviction, you're going to get even better results, which is going to feed back to your confidence. And you can see the feedback loop. And you keep getting better and better and better and better at this until you become unstoppable. The confidence thing is big. Saying the right things in the right order, having a presentation that addresses what's most important to sellers, not talking about you and I, but talking about what's important to them is vital. But you also could say the right things, but not be confident. Clients don't want to work with somebody that's not confident. When I started in the business, I had zero confidence. In fact, my mindset was I couldn't believe that anybody would actually list their home with me. Couldn't believe it. And that quickly changed in a couple of years to an attitude of, I can't believe anybody wouldn't list with me. Okay, so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to go through everything that you need to say in the order that you're going to say it. At the end of the webinar, I'll answer your questions, and you can type those questions into the chat box as we go along, and our operator, Andrea, will read those questions. We can also take some live questions as well. So Don't be shy. Any question you have, it's not, there's no dumb questions here today. So just type your questions into the chat as we move along here, and hopefully I'll be able to answer every question. I feel confident I will be able to, because I really know this subject. Okay, so that being said, let's get started here. And please pay attention as we're going through this. I know there's lots of distractions. You get your iPhone in front of you, you're checking your emails or whatever. But this is a really, really important topic, and I hope you feel my sincerity. I really want to help you with this part of your business. You're going to start off by asking the right questions of sellers. Okay, you have to value your time. Many of you have had this experience of, running out to meet with a seller, and you get to the seller's home, and in about 5 or 10 minutes, you realize you're completely wasting your time because this seller is just not motivated. They're not ready to sell their home. And if you book the appointment for yourself, you've got nobody else to blame but you. And I made that mistake many times earlier in my career. Here I am working 12 hours a day, and I was really quite upset with myself for spending, an hour at somebody's home when they weren't even ready to list. They aren't ready to list. And they're not ready to list. No matter what you do or say is going to compel them to list. If they have a real reason not to list now, then you need to identify that by asking questions and not be there. Because if you get to their home and they truly are 6 months out from listing their house, it doesn't matter what you say, they're not going to retain any of that in 6 months. Whatever price you give them will be incorrect in 6 months. And 6 months from now, when they're ready to interview agents, how much are they going to retain of what you had to say? Right? You'll be long forgotten about, and your chances of getting that listing are next to nothing. So you've got to ask questions about motivation and timing. Only agree to meet with people that are motivated and their timing is now. Okay, and you're going to use the universal callback script for that. Now, one of the most important questions to ask if they are motivated and their timing's now, don't be shy about this. Don't be afraid to ask them if they're going to be speaking to other agents, because I want you to position yourself in as last. Now, I used to be shy about this. I used to be afraid to ask the question. Why? Because I didn't want to know the answer. I was terrified they might say, yeah, we're interviewing other agents. But we must ask that question. Then I want you to position yourself in last. Why last? Because I figure it this way. If I'm the last one they speak to, if they interview 3 agents, I'm the last one in, I don't have to be any better than the other agents. I just have to be as good. If I'm the last one in, chances are they're probably going to, just sign up with me. At least I can handle any objections. But the real truth of the matter is, if the presentation is awesome, you're not going to have any objections. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So if they say, yeah, we're going to be speaking to other agents, I want you to say, well, I'd like to be the last realtor you speak with. Why? So I can show you how much extra I do to get your home sold. Remember, everybody operates, WIFM. They all listen to the same radio station. What's in it for me? So I'd like to be the last realtor you meet with. Why? So I can show you how much extra I do to get your home sold. If they are agreeable to that, you're going to ask them when they're going to be meeting with the other agents, and you're going to position yourself last in. So if the last realtor they're meeting with is on Friday, then you're going to set up an appointment maybe for Friday evening or Saturday morning. Now, the only thing that can go wrong with this strategy, because I know what some of you are thinking, well, what if they list with one of the other agents before I get there? Look, here's how we're going to dramatically reduce the chance of that happening. You're going to use this language. Once they agree to let you set your appointment to be last in, I want you to say to them, now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to do a fair amount of work in preparation for our appointment on Saturday, and all I ask in return is for your commitment not to list with one of the other agents until we have a chance to meet. Does that sound fair? Now, what do you think, folks? Is that a fair thing to ask of them? I think so, because you and I do spend a lot of time preparing for these appointments. Once I get them to say yes, and 99% of them will say yes to this, once you can get them to say yes, then if they list with another agent before you meet with them, that's a very difficult phone call for them to make. Basically, they got to call you up and say, hey, I lied to you. Even though I committed to not listing with one of the agents before I met with you, well, guess what? I lied. So again, the language is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to do a fair amount of work in preparation for our appointment on Saturday, and all I ask in return is for your commitment not to list with one of the other realtors before we have a chance to meet. Does that sound fair? Now, the natural conclusion to an awesome presentation is the seller says, where do I sign? If you're faced with all kinds of objections, it simply tells us that your presentation isn't good enough. So I want you to think about that right now. If your experience on the listing presentation right now is at the end of your presentation, they're grilling you about your commission, they don't see value, they see you the same as everybody else, they only want to list with you for 30 days, they won't give you, the right price. All of these objections that you're getting, understand they're symptoms of the fact that you don't have a strong enough listing presentation. If you build massive credibility with your presentation, most of these objections will go away, or they'll certainly be lessened. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you make so much money with my system here that you want to go out and hire a financial planner to take care of all the money that I've helped you make. And you meet with a couple of financial planners, and the first person doesn't seem to know what they're doing. The second person, though, really seems to have their finger on the pulse of the market. They really, they know what's going on with the Dow Jones and the S&P and the TXR. They really know their stuff. Who would you hire to take care of your money? Which financial planner would you choose? Obviously, the financial planner that you perceive to be the expert. And I'm going to use the word perceived here a lot today because that's what the listing presentation is all about. It's about creating this perception amongst the seller that you are the obvious choice amongst the 2 or 3 or 4 realtors that they've interviewed. Okay, so the natural conclusion to an awesome presentation is at the end of it, the seller says, hey, where do I sign? So now we're going to go through the ultimate listing presentation. This is actually the first slide in the actual presentation that you're going to be able to download right off of the coaching website. Now, what I love about PowerPoint and what you're going to love about PowerPoint is you can customize it. Now, be careful with that, though, because if you change my presentation, you can't really, come back, turn around and say, well, your presentation doesn't work because you're not using it the way I used it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make adjustments to it. And I'm going to share with you some of the adjustments that you may want to make to the presentation. For example, if you don't have a guaranteed sale program, we're going to ask you to insert something else. If you're a solo agent, you don't work with a team, you can make an adjustment to that. So we'll handle all of that during the presentation. So imagine now I am that you're the seller and I'm sitting at your kitchen table, which is, by the way, where most of these presentations are conducted, right? You definitely want to go to a table, okay, not a family room where you're sitting, 20 feet away from the sellers. You're an actor, and like all actors, you must set the stage. So ask politely to sit at a table. Make sure husband and wife are either to your left or your right, so you're not bobbing your head back and forth trying to divide your attention between the two, because that never works. So before we get into the presentation, what else would you and I do when we get to their home? We would ask to sit at a table. Maybe we're at the kitchen table and you plunk down your briefcase or whatever, and you boot up your laptop. Now you're going to go for a look around the house, aren't you? Okay, so before we get to this presentation, we're going to have a look at what we're dealing with. As you're looking around, you're doing the walkthrough on the property, it's an excellent time for you to ask questions to determine the personality type of the seller. A great question to ask is, what do you do for a living? If they're a D personality or an I personality, they may be attracted to certain occupations. So, if the husband says, well, I'm a negotiator for General Motors, you probably know he's a D personality. If the wife says, well, I'm in sales, she's probably a high I. Okay, if they're a computer engineer, a C. An accountant, probably a C. If they're in, a school teacher or a nurse, they're an S personality. So I'm not saying this is 100%, but it does give us a clue. Also, you can tell, you have a pretty good idea of what their personality type is by the way they answer your questions and by the questions they ask of you. So, if you walk in the door and they're super friendly, you're probably dealing with an I. They're asking really detailed questions, or they're reserved, they're probably an S or a C. It's very important before you start your presentation to have a clue as to the personality type of the sellers you're working with. Now, you'll get better at this over time as you become a student of the DISC personality test, as you become more involved with our program, and with practice. Now, I'm going to recommend this, though, that for you D and I personalities, you always want to go in slow, just slow things down a little bit until you establish the personality type of the seller. Now, for S and C realtors on the call here today, just be yourself. Just go in slow like you normally do. But if you determine that the sellers are D's and I's, you better quicken up the pace. Okay, if you determine it's an S or C personality, you maintain a slower pace in your presentation. And we'll talk more about this as we go through the program. But let's get back to that presentation. So now we've taken a walk around the house. We know what we're dealing with, and we're going to go through the presentation. So we're going to start off with the first slide that says your home's going to sell faster for top dollar with the least amount of hassle. And you're going to receive superior results with our unique team system. Now, if you don't have a team, you're going to take that out. You're going to say, and instead of our, you're going to use my exclusive and innovative consumer programs, my leading edge technology, okay, my specialized knowledge. I really like this slide. It's very disarming to sellers, especially when they're interviewing, because we know they're interviewing for only one reason. They're not interviewing realtors because they think it's fun. The only reason they're interviewing a real estate agent is because they don't want to make a mistake. So I let them know that they're smart to interview because 72% of homeowners were dissatisfied with their last agent. Now, that's sort of disarming when we as realtors come into their home and say, hey, guess what? 72% of home sellers would not use their last agent. And the major reason for this dissatisfaction is poor communication. So we're going to discuss now how we handle it. We guarantee to call you every single week with an update. And we guarantee to return any phone calls you make of us in a timely fashion. I'm going to remind the seller that to do a really good job to get their home sold, there's quite a bit to do. If we're going to do this properly, there's a lot to do to get their home sold. But most real estate agents, they kind of go through the ABCs of real estate marketing. They kind of casually go through the steps, but we're going to show the contrast between what we do and what the average real estate agent does. So let's have a look at these ABCs of real estate service, what most realtors do. A, they advertise themselves. B, they bang a sign on your lawn. C, they create an ad for the paper, and if they have any money, they'll run it. D, they download your listing into MLS. So in Toronto, there'll be, 50,000 homes on MLS. E, they encourage their office to show your home. F, they kick you out of their house on the weekends, and they figure they'll try one of those traditional open houses. And if none of that works, G, they get on their knees and pray your home will sell. And here's how most agents operate. They're solo agents. They work all by themselves. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. If you're a solo agent, you're saying, well, I don't want to say that. And you're right. I'll show you in a minute what you're going to do and what you're going to say if you're a solo agent. But if you have a team, then you're going to use this analogy. Here's the single agent juggling all the balls by themselves. That's how I used to work. That's what I say to sellers. I used to work that way. And now I have an entire team. So when you hire me now, you get me and my entire team for the same price as this solo agent that's juggling all the balls. Now, as a solo agent, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I tried my best. I worked 6, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and I tried my darndest to do a good job handling all of the details that needed to be taken care of. But what I found is it was very, very difficult to stay on top of everything and to focus on the details that were most important to you. And what I discovered, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is by delegating some of the work, I could focus on some of the more important things. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I don't think you care who gets the key cut on your home, or who takes the picture, or who makes the feature sheet, or who installs the key box, who puts up the for sale sign. So I delegated a lot of the administrative duties so I could focus on the high impact activities, like finding a buyer for your home and negotiating the highest price. So today, just like other professionals, I work with a team. And the analogy I might want to give here is I might want to talk about, how a lawyer works. When you hire your lawyer has a team that helps him or her. They have legal assistants that probably do 70 to 80% of the work. So the lawyer, the attorney, can focus on the high impact activities. When you go to your doctor has administrative people and nurses, assistants to help, so the doctor can focus on what's most important. Well, just like other professionals, when you get me and my entire team working for you. So no detail is forgotten about. Nothing slips between the cracks. Each one of my team members has a very specific role to play in the selling of your home. Now, what you might want to do is you might want to have pictures of all the different people on your team. So I have, if you've got a buyer agent, you'd have a picture of your buyer agent here. If you've got a closing coordinator, which is, more in the U.S., we have lawyers that close the transactions here, but you might want to have a picture of your real estate lawyer because your real estate lawyer is really part of your team. You might want to have a picture of your lender. Your mortgage broker is part of your team. If you've got an administrative person that enters, takes care of your database or helps you with customer service or any of the administrative details, just insert their pictures and their name and talk a little bit about what they do. So, when you hire me, you get Cindy, and Cindy takes care of our database, and you get Tammy, and Tammy's our customer service manager. Okay, and you get Susie. She's our administrator. Now, because I have all of these people taking care of these parts of my business, I can spend more time helping you get your home sold, getting you the best results, working on the marketing, working on negotiating offers, okay, getting your home sold for the highest price in the shortest amount of time. Now, when I was a solo agent, and for those of you that don't yet have a team, you can use this slide. You could hide all these other slides. You see, you can hide all of these slides. You can hide. You know how to hide them, and you could show this slide because this was my story before I had a team. And I want everyone to understand this is the fantastic thing about marketing. Please write this down. Marketing is a battle of perceptions. Marketing is not about what's real. Okay, marketing is a battle of perceptions. It's not about what's real. This is why every once in a while, when you get beat out on a listing by somebody that's, you get beat out on a listing by somebody that's less experienced than you are. They don't have the marketing that you have. They don't have all the programs and services that you have. They don't have the experience that you have, or the track record that you have. And that always used to frustrate me. How the heck did this agent beat me out on this listing? They weren't as experienced. They didn't have the track record. They didn't do all the things I do, because the other realtor did a better job of painting a perception in the seller's mind that they were going to do a better job. So marketing is not about what's real. It's about perception. So when I worked as a solo agent, I couldn't talk about a team. Here's the story that I would tell. I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I don't delegate you to people that are less experienced or less competent than I am. Okay, I take care of everything myself. Now, can everybody see how you can make both stories work? Okay, I provide personalized service. I do everything myself. I don't delegate any of these important responsibilities in the sale of your largest asset to people that are less experienced or less competent than I am. So we can make all of these arguments work, and that is what we must do. We must look at our strengths and we must look at our weaknesses, and the presentation must be designed around the strengths that you have, about what you can say about yourself. Now, let me just fast forward here. As I started to develop my team, here's what I would say. I would say, I used to be one of those agents that worked all by myself, and I tried really, really hard for sellers. I wanted to do the very best job. And even though agents that work by themselves are going to tell you that they provide you personalized service, that they're going to give you their undivided attention, what I found is I was completely divided amongst all the tasks that I had to perform. And that's where, some of the balls started to drop. Things slipped through the cracks. And I found that it was a lot more effective, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, by delegating some of the activities where I knew I couldn't change the outcome. So I could focus on those that I knew I could change the outcome on. And then, I would list some of the things like I already have, getting keys cut, paperwork, signs up and down. You don't really care who does that. It needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily need to be done by me. So here's an example in the presentation where each one of you can customize it. You either have a team or you don't have a team. Now, for those of you that don't have a team, though, let me caution you on this. Very soon into my career, I started talking about my team, even though I really didn't have a team, because I'd start talking about how my real estate lawyer was on my team, how my mortgage broker was on my team, how the administrative person at the front desk of the RE/MAX office was on my team. Now, none of these people, actually officially worked only for me, but I created this perception that I had a team long before I really did, because the truth of the matter is, it was just me. I was just a solo agent. So even if you are a solo agent, you can still spin your presentation to make it look like you've got this team when you really don't. But ultimately, as your business starts to grow, you are going to be probably interested in hiring some administrative people and some licensed people to help you. That's the natural evolution with this program if you wish it to be. Not everybody wants to sell 100 or 200 homes, but usually the people that say, well, I have no interest in selling 200 homes, they only say that because they believe that the price they'd have to pay in time and in commitment is too high. But I can tell you, I worked way less hours selling 500 homes a year than I did selling 50 homes a year. It's all about leverage. Okay, back to our presentation here. What we want to do now is we want to set ourselves apart from the other realtors that the seller has interviewed. So we're going to talk about our innovative consumer programs. We're going to talk about some of the things that we do that nobody else does. So we pioneered, or if you're a solo agent, you're going to change we to I have pioneered, unique and exclusive consumer programs not offered by any other agent. We're going to talk about our 24-hour talking ads. When you list your home with me, your home's going to be advertised 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You see, here's the problem. As you know, nobody wants to really talk to a salesperson. So what we found is when we remove the salesperson and we include this toll-free 800 number, and we give your property its own specific 4-digit ID number. Prospects can call in, buyers can call in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have to talk to a salesperson. We found out that 3 times as many buyers are willing to do that, are willing to inquire about your home when they know they don't have to talk to a salesperson, which is good. And look at prospective buyers who actually look at your home are going to be a lot more pre-qualified because they've already received a lot of information on your home. You know, at least we're making it an attempt to qualify buyers and give them very detailed information about your home before they look at it, versus a lot of our competitors that'll just drag anybody and everybody through your property. The next thing I want to talk about, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are traditional open houses, because I'm not a big fan of traditional open houses. The definition of a traditional open house is a place where the real estate agent goes and nobody else does. So, you know, here's traditional open house, the agent sitting there watching TV, maybe having a little nap. It's a very passive approach. You know, the realtor is just sitting there waiting and hoping and praying that a qualified buyer is going to knock on the door and say, "Oh my gosh, this is the house of my dreams." But, you know, really, what's the chances of that? Well, the NAR tells us the chances aren't very good. Here's a list of where buyers come from. Only 1% of buyers last year bought their home from a traditional open house. So I'm not going to say it never works, but there's a 99% chance that that's not going to work for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to open your home on a tour. Each house is open for 15 minutes. There's 10 minutes between each property. And we're purposely going to drive all the buyers to your home at the exact same time. This is going to create competition, or what we call the auction effect. You know, sometimes we're able to create urgency. We're able to get maybe multiple offers. And worst case, if nobody comes, hey, we're pretty happy that the home is only open for 15 minutes. So we're not kicking you out of your house every Saturday and Sunday. In fact, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we ask that you be present, because we want to show off our marketing savvy. We want to show you that what we're doing is actually working. Also, because buyers have to be there at a very specific 15-minute window, we think we do a better job of, qualifying these buyers. The buyers actually had to make an effort to be at your home between 1 and 1:15. Next, I talk about the buyer profile system. And this is, by the way, folks, the part of the presentation I really, really like the most. Okay, this is the part of the presentation where I think I really get them. I explained that most real estate agents, when they work with buyers, here's how they do it. Most agents pick out 6 homes. They show the buyer 4, and then they try to sell you 1. Okay, we don't do it that way. Okay, our solution is our one-of-a-kind buyer profile system that gives buyers priority access to hot new listings that match their home buying criteria. So we're not going to pick out the homes for the buyers. We're going to let the buyers pick out the homes, because we're going to email them every day all the homes that match their criteria. As you can see here, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we have over 300 buyers that are currently getting information on us, from us every day on homes that match their criteria. Okay, now at this point, what I do is I have in my briefcase, I have props. Earlier I said that we're like actors, and we have to set the stage. Well, realize all actors have props. So in my briefcase, I've got 11 pages stapled together, top and corner, and it's a list of all the buyers that we're currently working with. And I pull this list out, and I hand it to the buyers or the sellers, and I let them look at it. You can see their eyes looking at this list with all these names on it. I said, now, if you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you decide to list your home with me, the very first thing that I would do is I would send out information on your home to the buyers that we're currently working with. So there's a list of over 300 buyers that we're currently working with. As you can see, it tells the buyer's name, which one of my buyer's agents, to the right of it, which one of my buyer agents is working with that buyer, and how many weeks they've been receiving information from us, how many pictures of homes they received last week, 2 weeks ago, and in total. So if you decide to list your home with me, the very first thing that I'm going to do is send information on your home out to the buyers in my database. So it sounds kind of crazy, but it's almost like I've been looking for a buyer for your home before you and I even met today. And I pause. Then I might say this. If they've interviewed other agents, you might say, now, I understand you've interviewed you've spoken to a couple of other agents. Did the other agents you meet with, did they tell you about how many buyers they're currently working with? If they had a lot of buyers, don't you think they would have mentioned that? So we're going to use our computerized buyer-seller matchup system to find a buyer for your home. And by the way, I really like that language when I say, the first thing we're going to do, if you decide to list with me, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to email information on your home out to the buyers in our database. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's almost like I've been looking for a buyer for your home before you and I even met today. Because what do we know about sellers? Do sellers want to list their home? Not really. What sellers want to do is sell their home. So I start talking in different language. I'm not talking about listing their home. I'm talking about selling their house to one of the buyers I currently have in my database. Also, you and I cannot talk down any of our competitors. It's just a bad idea. Ethically, we can't do it. It's just a bad idea. But do you see how I become a master of creating doubt? Did everyone catch that? Did the other agents you interviewed, did they talk to you about how many buyers they're currently working with? And they just leave it at that. Now, what is the seller thinking? They're thinking, well, heck, if the other realtors had a big, long list of buyers like Craig, they probably would have mentioned that to us. If they did have those buyers, they certainly didn't tell us that. So we're creating doubt. I'm positioning myself in this part of the presentation as the realtor that has all the buyers. Now, where are you going to get your buyers from? Where are you going to get this list? Okay, how about your Success website? Go into the control panel, print out from your control panel or from the AMS control panel, that's your hotline control panel, print out a list of all the buyer leads, all the buyers that have contacted you, responded to all your buyer leads. There's your list. And talk about your internet strategy. Show them your website. Show them how we have a very unique approach. We offer information to compel buyers to contact us. Most real estate agents don't do that. Their website's about them, right? A big picture of them, how great they are. That's not our approach. The reason we have buyers in our database, the reason buyers contact us is because we address what's important to them. We offer them information on how to buy a home. Okay, we offer them hot lists of properties. So it's very important that you give the seller a backstage pass to the way you do business. Okay, don't assume because you know what you're doing that they know what you're doing. Each one of you that are involved in this program, you have a wonderful story to tell about how your marketing is different, how your marketing is client-centered. It's centered around what buyers and sellers want. So explain how your marketing works and then give evidence of the effectiveness of your marketing by printing out the leads, the list of names of buyers that you have generated from your Success websites and from your AMS hotlines. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can look just like mine, just like this. And it's printed out. It's a great prompt. You just hand it to them and you use this language and you'll see their eyes light up. They're like, wow, look at all the buyers. You see, our approach makes total sense. Okay, now I want you to talk about your performance guarantee. Now, I've inserted the guaranteed sale program for obvious reasons. This is the performance guarantee that I kicked serious butt with in Toronto. I mean, I basically owned my marketplace with this. Now, I understand that some of you are officially freaked out by this. Once you understand how this works, you would immediately do it. But, there's a lot of fear because you really don't understand it. You don't understand the math behind it. But important that all of us have some type of performance guarantee. Why? Because the number one trend in the country today is skepticism. You set yourself apart from everyone else by simply being accountable because nobody we compete with wants to be accountable. So check out my guaranteed sale program. If I don't sell your house, I'll buy the thing. I explain the real estate catch-22. If you own a home and you want to move up to a bigger home, you could get caught in a real estate catch-22. If you buy your next home but selling your existing home, you get stuck owning two homes. That's not good. Or if you sell your existing home and you don't find another home in time, you could be homeless, like this person. So I offer an insurance policy to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you won't get stuck in the real estate catch-22. I have this sign rider that will go on, if you list with me, this sign rider will go on your for sale sign. It says, buy this home and I'll buy your home for cash. Please understand, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm so motivated to get your home sold, I'm actually willing to buy somebody else's house to make it happen. Think about that. I'm so motivated to get your home sold that I'm actually willing to buy somebody else's house to make that happen. And I show them a copy of the guaranteed sale program. This is another prop that's in my briefcase. This is the real deal. I do this all the time. So here's how you're going to benefit. You're going to get a firm, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're going to get a firm offer from buyers versus a conditional one because I'm willing to guarantee the sale of the buyer's home. That's going to allow you now to make a firm offer, allowing you to move up to any one of our listings. Now, if you're not going to use the performance guarantee, what do? Okay, well, here's what you do. You hide all these slides. Okay, take them, hide every one of them, just hide them. You can do that in PowerPoint. And you're going to insert your performance guarantee right here. So what would your performance guarantee be? You could say something simple like this. If you're not happy with me at any time, I'll cancel the listing. That's a form of accountability. You could say, if I don't get you an offer, present you an offer on your home in 59 days, I'll deduct $500 off of your commission when it does sell. There's lots of different performance guarantees. I want you to brainstorm, what performance guarantee are you going to use? It's important that you have one. Okay, you want to set yourself apart from everyone else. This is your big chance. So where it says performance guarantee, you're going to insert yours. And this is something your coach can help you with. Specialized knowledge. Now, it's important, as I said earlier, that you and I look like experts. I gave you the example earlier of the financial planner. You want to work with the expert. If you want them to choose you at the end of the presentation and you want them to take your advice on the list price, then they need to perceive you as the expert. When you get to the end of the listing and you go into pricing, and pricing, by the way, should always be done at the end. You never ever talk about price before you go through the benefits portion. Because if they don't like your price, they don't even listen to all your benefits. They've already tuned you out. So you always talk about the benefits portion first, then you go to pricing, and then you go to your real estate commission, your fee. Okay, there's an order to this. I didn't know that. When I was, I didn't really have a presentation when I got started in this business. My presentation was I had 5 or 6 printouts from MLS. And if they didn't like my price, boom, I was at the door. So don't do that. You got to win them over first. They're more likely going to take your advice on price if they see you as an expert. Does that make sense? If your presentation is successful and they see you as the expert, you built massive credibility in their eyes, they're way more likely to take your advice on price, even if they don't like the price. So specialized knowledge. Where do buyers come from? I bring in information about where buyers come from. Okay, I bring in information about what's happening in the market. Now, I get all this information in Toronto from a company called IMS. These guys are great. They give you this third-party information. His name's Leon Dancona. Many of you may know him. But I can get you the contact info for these guys. They will give you third-party audited information on market trends in Toronto or in any marketplace for that matter. So here's a chart of homes that have sold for 100% of the asking price. Now you can see that that's not happening as much now. That's dropping off. So what would that tell a seller? Hey, not as many people in Toronto are selling for full market value. Okay, here's days units sold. Not as many homes are selling in my MLS district. What does that tell you? The market's slowing down, right? Let's have a look at average price. Average price is kind of up and down, but overall it's down off of the peak. Market's slowing down. An intelligent person would start to look at this and say, okay, the market's slowing down. Look at this. This is percentage of asking price. So homes at the peak were selling for almost 99% of asking price, and now look what's happening. It's down to 97 point something. So the market clearly, that would tell you the market's slowing down, right? You know, no one graph, no one chart maybe tells a complete story, but if you take all of this information together, like sales by volume, it's going down. The market's softer than it was. So an intelligent person would come to the conclusion that, holy cow, the market's not as good at the end of the year here as it was at the beginning of the year. Look at this. Days in the market are way up here at the end of the year versus the beginning of the year. So the mistake would be to bring in the same stuff that everybody else brings in. You know, we wonder why we don't do a good job of setting ourselves apart from our competitors, but most realtors bring in the exact same comparables. You know, it is true. We all go to the same well for information, MLS, but if you bring in the exact same MLS printouts as the other 2 or 3 agents are interviewing, then that's certainly not setting you apart. That's really saying you're the same as everybody else. So, you know, try to go to MLS and either do this yourself or hire a company. It's very inexpensive, by the way, to get these graphs. I mean, we're talking a couple $100. Get this information, get it into your presentation. I like the fact that it's a third-party auditor, because if I came into your house and I said, okay, here's what's going on with the list to sales ratio. You know, here's what's going on with the sales volume. You know, here's what's going on with days on the market. I'm showing you evidence of what's happening in the marketplace. I'm showing you what no other realtor is showing you. I become the expert in your eyes. You're way more likely to take my advice on price. Okay, now the next part of the presentation is track record. So I want you to compare your track record or your company's track record against MLS. Now, because I was with RE/MAX, of course I'm going to show this stat. But if I was with Century 21, you can bet your bottom dollar I wouldn't be showing this. You're only going to use the stats that make you look good. Now, this is something I was very proud of. My listings sold on average for 2% more than the board average. So people that listed with me sold for 97.47% of the asking price. The board average was 95.46%. So when you list with Craig Proctor, you sell for, on average, over $3,000 more. Okay, over 2% more or closer to the asking price. How many of you, if you did the research, would find that you've got an advantage? Your list to sales ratio is higher than the MLS average. Or how about days in the market? This is another statistic I was proud of. When you list with me, average days in the market, 33 days. The average days in the market in my MLS district were 68 days. So your home will sell in less than half the time. That's very important to sellers. This is one of the most important statistics, though. If you list your home with me, almost 87% of the time, the house will sell and close, but the real estate board average is only 56%. So your home will sell for more money, it'll sell in less time, and there's almost a 90% chance of it selling and closing if you list with me. Did the other realtors show you this information? And the answer is always no. So in summary, now here's the close. If you even want to call it a close, you shouldn't have to be a closer if you've got a great presentation. Remember, I'm going to say it again, the natural conclusion to an awesome presentation is at the end of it, the seller says, hey, what do I sign? So in summary, my specialized knowledge is going to ensure you get the right information and the right advice. My aggressive marketing and innovative consumer programs and leading-edge technology is going to ensure you get better results and less hassle. And the next step is the sold sign. And then I want you to include some testimonials. Here's what our clients have to say. So surely you've got a couple of raving fans, even one happy client, even if it was by mistake. Make sure you include some testimonials here. And that's the presentation. Now, you haven't got into pricing yet. What I want you to say, now that you're done with the benefits portion of the presentation, I want you to say, now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on what we've discussed, would you like me to handle this for you? Well, they're likely going to say, well, I don't know. We haven't, sometimes they say yes. Often they'll say, well, I don't know. We haven't discussed the list price, or we haven't discussed your fee. To which you're going to say, well, assuming we can come to an agreement on the asking price and my fee, would you like me to handle this for you? I want to get them to say yes, because if I get them to say yes, at that point, it's going to be very difficult for them to say no, because if they balk at signing the listing with me, at least I know it wasn't the benefits portion, because they've already told me that assuming we can agree on the asking price and the fee, they'll list with me. If at the end of the presentation they won't list with me, well, guess what? I know it either has to be they didn't like my list price or they didn't like the fee. Now, why is it important to isolate the objection? Well, because if we can isolate the objection, at least we know what it is so we can handle it. And I didn't used to do it that way. What I used to do is I'd go through, my benefits. I didn't have many of them. Then I'd go through the comparables, where I bring the same, stuff as everybody else. And then I'd talk about my fee. And then at the end, they'd say, oh, no, thanks, or we'll think about it, or we'll get back to you. Well, the problem is I didn't know what they were saying no to. I didn't know whether they're saying no to they didn't like me, or they didn't like my benefits, they didn't like the price, they didn't like my commission rate. I didn't know what they were saying no to. And because I didn't know what they were objecting to, I couldn't handle it. You can't handle an objection when you don't know what it is. So this really worked for me. Benefits portion first, then asking for the order. You're basically asking for the order. You're saying, look, based on what we've discussed so far, would you like me to handle this? Sometimes they say yes. Remember, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? But in many cases, they would say exactly what you would expect them to say. Well, you haven't told me what the price is. You haven't told me what your fee is. Well, assuming we can come to an agreement on the asking price and my fee, based on what we've discussed so far, would you like me to handle it? And most times you can get them to say, well, I guess so. I mean, assuming we can come to an agreement on the asking price and the fee. Once you get them that far, you've pretty much got them. When you get really good at this, folks, you will list 9 out of 10 sellers. I got to say this too. The 1 out of 10 that I didn't get is usually one that I didn't want. You are still going to run up with people that are, even though you've got an awesome presentation and you've brought them all kinds of evidence, they're not realistic. Okay, they're not realistic on price. They may be super motivated, but they might not be realistic. If you've got lots of business coming in and you're setting lots of appointments and you're listing 80 or 90% of the sellers you meet with, you're going to feel a lot better about saying no to the people that are unrealistic. And I got to that point where I could actually walk away from people that I thought were, going to fight me all the way through the process. But I got to say, the better the presentation became, the more likely the chances of them actually taking my advice. And that's the crazy thing about real estate that frustrates us, right? They hire us to sell their home, but then they fight us on everything. They don't take our advice. And then they turn around and complain that, we're not getting the job done. So we've got to, use the presentation to, number one, win the business, of course. And number two, to build such massive credibility that they take our advice on the asking price and they're willing to pay us more money. So that's how good the presentation has to be. It has to be so darn good that they're not only willing to pick us, but they're willing to pay us more. Because this program isn't about discounting. If they're interviewing other agents, especially here in Toronto, they're interviewing other agents. They're interviewing 3 agents. At least one of them is going to lowball on the commission. And you probably know another one's probably going to highball on the price. So that's how good your presentation has to be. They have to be willing to pick you and go with your price that's going to be lower and your commission rate that's going to be higher. It's a big challenge. And that's why today's topic is so vitally important. And that's why, I wasn't exaggerating at the beginning of this webinar when I said this is the ball game. This is really, really important because you can generate leads, you can make appointments, you can do everything right. But if you blow it at the listing presentation, you're basically working for free. You're spinning your wheels. But if you can start to convert these appointments to listings and get them priced right and get sales, that's the ballgame. I mean, what I love about listings is when you get listings, everyone in MLS now is working for you. That's the leverage point, is getting the listings. If you get lots of listings, guess what? The buyers take care of themselves. Okay, so look, we're at the top of the hour now, and you know what that means? It's question and answer time. So we're going to go over to Andrea. And Andrea, I assume we've got some typed-in chat questions.
We sure do. And if you have an audio mic or you're on your phone, you can also ask live audio questions by just tapping the hand icon with your mouse, and you'll get into my little queue, and I'll open your mic. While we're waiting for those callers, we'll go to the first chat question. It's from Paul Cantu. Do you hire a specialist to put together your PowerPoint presentation? If so, what's the cost?
I actually hired Adrian, who did the call here, to update my presentation. Initially, I had Shai Schwartzman from Lifestyle Media create my my PowerPoint presentation. But today, it's pretty easy to find somebody to customize it. And if you want to have a certain look, I mean, I wouldn't change the language, Paul. But if you want to have, a different background, a different colors, you want to brand it, that's perfectly fine. I know some of you do change the look. If you're with Keller Williams, you'll have that background or, or the Remax logo on it. That's perfectly fine. I've tried to make mine generic, so, I took off all the Remax stuff that I used to have on it. And Adrian has updated it. But, Paul, you can get anyone to do this. If you've got kids, teenagers, or nieces or nephews, or just put an ad on Craigslist, really easy to find somebody that will really jazz it up for you.
Before we go on, I would like to say if you also have a success story that using this presentation, we'd also love to hear from you. You can either type it and I'll tell it to the crowd, or do the hand icon and I will open your line.
Yeah, good point. I do love success stories. I do love success stories. So if you have any success stories, but you know what? I took your presentation, Craig, exactly the way it laid out, and I never had much success with sellers, and now I'm kicking butt. We'd love to hear that.
For sure. We are going on now to Laszlo Betyar. He has several questions. The first one, what's the source of the 72% dissatisfaction survey, and where can he see it?
Where can you see the survey?
Yes, that's what he wants to know. What is the source of it, and can you see it?
I don't even know where I got that. I've been using that now for probably 15 years. It was from NAR. It was way back when, but I do not remember where I have it, and I can't point you to where to get it today. But I would go, if you want to find any kind of stats like that, I would go to your real estate association. Okay, if you're in the U.S., go to your state association or go to NAR. And to try to, because they're constantly surveying. Or you could do this. You could even have someone in your area call sellers that have recently sold and do your own survey. Okay, it doesn't have to be a state or national survey. You could do your own survey in your town. But what you'll find is usually it's that or higher. Not many sellers go back to the same agent. And think about this. One good reason for that is 80% of real estate agents aren't even in business 5 years later. So the seller, moves on average every 7 years. They couldn't use their last agent 80% of the time, even if they wanted to, because he or she's no longer a realtor.
Okay, we'll go on. We actually have an audio question now from Matthew Tombrello. Your mic is open.
Hey, Craig, how you doing?
Hey, Matthew.
How's everything?
Good. I've been emailing you back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been a great help. I just wanted to share a success story. I couldn't resist since you brought it up. I used this listing presentation and the modified one, as you well know, Craig. And the biggest thing with the sellers and I got all the listings, by the way, they were absolutely dumbfounded, jaws right on their kitchen table. I was showing them marketing stuff and stats and just a different presentation that appealed to a very sensitive, unknown part they never knew they had. So I could tell you firsthand to all the listeners and on the webinar that this thing works.
Well, I appreciate that because I think especially those that are new to the program need to hear that. They need to have some some evidence that they're on the right track and this really works. But you see how quite often, I'd probably say about a third of the time, I wouldn't even get through the entire presentation. And the seller, I don't know if that's happened to you, where the seller says, okay, you know what, I've heard enough. We're convinced. We want to go with you. Yeah,
lots of the D's.
Yeah, and it's important to get that signal and not keep talking. If they're ready to list with you, it's don't talk past that point.
You might talk yourself out of the listing, yeah.
Now, did you do much customizing to the presentation, or did you use it exactly the way it's laid out?
Well, I'm using the plot one, but the fundamentals are pretty much the same. But yeah, just pretty much how it's laid out. I tweaked it a little bit, just more graphic related. But I mean, the structure and the substance is still the same.
Okay.
Our next question is chat, and it comes from Joanna Lonsku. What if I do not have listings to offer a tour of homes? And is a tour advertised, and where?
Okay. First of all, you don't have to have listings to do a tour. You could borrow listings from other agents in your office. But even if that doesn't work for you, remember the beauty with PowerPoint is, worst case, you can just hide those slides. Okay. Now you may still want to do a traditional open house. So you could, if you wanted to, just insert a traditional open house. As I said, I'm not a big fan of those. So your choices are completely hide the slides that talk about open house, replace the tour of home slides with, hey, I'm going to do a traditional open house, or figure out how you're actually going to do a tour of homes even though you don't have any listings by borrowing some listings from agents in your office that have them.
Okay, our next question comes from Laszlo. I just got a listing, but I have no buyer processing list for that home. How do I create such a list, especially before I know the details, price, condition, features of the home I want to list?
Okay, now remember the list, we're talking about the list of buyers that I would bring out of my briefcase?
I'm not sure. He just calls it the buyer processing list.
Okay. Well, I'm going to assume you're talking about the list of buyers, the 300 buyers. Those buyers were not in any specific price range. Those were all the buyers that I could muster up from. You go to your Success website, you go to your AMS. Really, what we're looking for is bulk. I want to impress the seller by saying, look, these are all the buyer leads. These are all the buyers we're emailing information out to. Now, most of those buyers, you're right, may not be in that price range. They might not be looking for that particular type of home or in that area. It doesn't matter. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to create this perception that you and I are the source of all the buyers. I mean, you can list your home with whoever you want, but why not just list with me? Because look at this, I've got 300 buyers or 100 buyers or whatever it is. And you're going to get your buyers from your control panel. Okay, like you're going to well, not your control panel. They're going to be emailed to you, right? All the leads in your database that have come in from the website, from the hotline. You can go to your control panel, I guess, and get them that way as well. But you want to assemble a list and use it exactly the way that I suggested. Hey, it's very, very powerful. As I said, it's one of my most favorite parts of the presentation because it's one of the most effective.
Our next participant with a question, Mark Skelpsa. How do I handle a seller who wants you to do an open house? How do they dissuade them?
I would show them the stats. I would explain it this way. A lot of realtors will do things to try to pacify the seller, even though they know it doesn't really work. And there's a 99% chance that a traditional open house is not going to do the trick. So if you really want me to do one, I'll do one for you. But, in my experience, being a realtor for X amount of years, they're just not that effective. What I'd suggest we do is we do something different. And then you can talk about either a tour of homes or something else that is going to be a lot more productive than a traditional open house. The trap that realtors have gotten themselves into, and you can see it is a terrible trap, is real estate agents tend to do things because it's the way it's always been done, even though we know it doesn't work. A quick example of that would be advertising listings in the newspaper. How much money do you think real estate agents blow all across the country every single day advertising listings when we as realtors would all freely admit it doesn't work that well? That when you blow your brains out advertising your listings in the newspaper, spending thousands of dollars, first of all, you get very few callers, very few people call you, and 90% of the people that do call you tell you that the home is too big, it's too small, it's in the wrong location or whatever, and they want to hang up on you. Yet today, still, after all these years, there's still people advertising their listings and blowing their brains out. And then because the seller sees everybody doing this, they demand that you do it. And then we succumb to that, so we start doing it. And then the next seller comes along and says, well, you know, everyone's doing it, so I want you to do it, and it's self-fulfilling. Same thing with open houses. It's the way it's always been done, and you can't really blame the seller, right? They see all of these agents advertising their listings every week and doing open houses every week, so the poor seller thinks, well, since everyone's doing it, it must be the thing to do, so they demand it, and instead of realtors standing up for themselves saying, well, it's foolish, they succumb and they do it, and on it goes.
Market trends. Home has sold for 100% of asking price. If a house sells for $500,000 and it was value range at $480,000 to $530,000, how would you count that home?
Yeah, it's different with value range marketing. That's a good question. I never really did that, so I'm not sure how to answer that. I guess I don't know whether you take the top of the range or the bottom of the range. Obviously, the bottom of the range is probably going to be, you know, closer to what it's sold for. So I don't know. I can't really comment on that because I never used value range marketing.
Okay, and we have one from Stephen Porter. Where in your presentation do you insert your cancellation guarantee? How long is your average listing term?
Okay, we insert it right at the very end, and let me just show everybody that. I think we've got it here. See if we can get this going here. It's stuck. I like to list them for 6 months because, you know, even though my days on the market were much less than that, you know, who knows? So if you're going to spend all this money and time, you want to get a commitment. You want to make sure that you've got the listing long enough to get the job done. Here's the cancellation guarantee. So at the very end of this all, I show all the testimonials, and I'm down to that 1 in 10 that I said would balk. You know, they're not, for whatever reason, they're not ready to list. Or they are ready to list, but they're not convinced that I'm the guy. I can go to the cancellation guarantee, and this is another prop that I have in my briefcase, and I would pull this piece of this cancellation guarantee out, and all of you should have this printed out in your briefcase just like that. And I would hand it to the seller. And Andrea, if you were the seller, I would say, Andrea, this piece of paper is very, very important because what this means, you know, I know you interviewed agents, and you interviewed agents because you didn't want to make a mistake. Well, what this piece of paper does is it guarantees you that if you list your home with me, you didn't make a mistake. You'll never make a mistake, because I can't be one of these real estate agents that comes into your home today and I sound, you know, all great. I make all kinds of promises today, but then I don't follow through. You know, I may sound good today to get your business, but I have to do a good job every day to keep your business. Because if you're unhappy for any reason, you can cancel the listing and list with any one of the other agents you met with. So there's no risk in listing with me. However, if you list with one of my competitors, one of the other realtors you met with, and you're not happy, you may be locked in for 3 months or 6 months or whatever. So, you know, listing with me is risk-free. And we know that people don't like risk. And you can see, quite often, you can see the sellers, their shoulders will relax because you've made their decision easy. And that's what really we want to do, is we want to make their decision of the correct decision of listing with us easy. Because as soon as we give them that cancellation guarantee, listing with your competitors becomes risky. Listing with us becomes risk-free. So again, the language is, this is Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is a very important guarantee. This piece of paper is very important because this guarantees that you're going to be happy with your decision in listing with me. I can't be one of these realtors. I'm not one of these realtors that comes in and I sound good today and then I don't follow through. I have to be good not only today to get your business, but I have to do a good job every single day to keep your business. If you're not happy for any reason at all, you can cancel your listing agreement. This is an unconditional cancellation guarantee. It doesn't matter whether I think I'm doing a good job. What matters is what you think. So if you're not happy, anytime you can cancel the agreement and list with one of the other agents. However, if you list with one of the other realtors and you're not happy, you're stuck. Okay, so this piece of paper did make me a lot of money, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, because there's many sellers, and we know this, right? There's many sellers that we meet with that are kind of on the fence. You ever get that feeling where they're almost there, they're just almost ready to list with you, but there's something holding them back? That's when you're going to use this. It'll help tip those fence sitters in your direction. All right, who's next?
Okay, we have Ellen Ho. She was able to type her question. She says, the buyer's list. I know I can get it from the data at AMS or Success, but what if I have nothing in there yet? How does she create one?
Okay. Well, I would start to build your list now. When you get ad calls, when you get sign calls, when you generate internet leads through the Success website, when you generate hotline leads through the AMS hotlines, you start to build your list. Maybe it could even be a list of past clients because they're potential buyers. You see, when we started in this business, we all have the same problem. We don't have a list. We don't have a database. So you're in the beginning of building it. Now, how about this? Even if you had 10 buyers on your list, your list of 10 buyers that you present to the seller in this presentation the way I showed you here today would be better than the no list that your competitors are presenting, because you know your competitors are not talking about what they do to actually find a buyer or giving any proof at all that they have any buyers or the effectiveness of how well what they do actually works. Because all they're talking about is how they want the listing. Okay, we want the listing. We want the listing. We want the listing. List with us. So even a small list of buyers presented the way that I presented it here today is going to be superior than the no buyers that your competition presents. Anyway, we're out of time here for today, so I hope everybody enjoyed our webinar. I hope you also know that everything that we talked about here today is available on the coaching site. So you can download this exact PowerPoint presentation from the coaching website. You can use it exactly the way it is, or you can make these small, minor customizations. You can hide slides. You can, tailor this for you and your business. But the most important thing is you need a presentation. You need a system. If your system right now is wing it, that's not going to cut it. Okay? If you have a system where you're saying the right things in the right order, you're going to get the right results. So thanks for being with us today. And Andrea, thanks as always for doing a great job.
My pleasure. Thank you, Craig. Thank you all for joining, and have a great afternoon.